Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, good people. Welcome. Welcome to my friends all around the world. Welcome, soul family. Welcome to my sacred grove. We're under the sacred trees by the sacred creek, in the sacred sunlight, having a sacred moment. Sacred. How is your heart today? Is your heart kind? How is your mind? Is your mind calm and clear? The question posed is, are you aiming towards spiritual perfection? Let's talk about it. In the previous video with the title Next Video, are you aiming toward spiritual perfection? See description. There's a plethora of definitions, meanings, views. You could even say opinions on what perfect means. Perfect. I hope you read it, because it's an introduction to what we're going to discuss in this video. I'm here in central Pennsylvania. It's about 35 degrees. That's okay. I hear the birds. I'm looking at lovely colors, the trees, the leaves turning. And I woke up, obviously, and I have some goals in mind. G-O-A-L-S, goals. I have some goals in mind. I aim to do some things today. What are your goals? What are your aims? What are your intentions? What do you seek to accomplish? I already did my morning meditation on the deck, my place of solace, my sanctuary. Down here, this is beautiful sights and sounds. If you read the description from the last video, you will find that perfection, or being perfect, there's actually two sides to it. I want to read from my 1951 dictionary what it has to say about perfection and perfect. Perfection, it says, is perfect condition, faultless, highest excellence. A perfect person or thing, a making complete, a making complete. That's under perfection. Under perfect, when it talks in the verb tense, it says perfect means complete. Complete. Perfect, past perfect, future perfect, all false from. Perfect a plan, improve, complete it. How can this be? How can this be? Well, let me tell you. What I've learned over the years is I've been misinformed about definitions. I've misread definitions. Some definitions to words have to do with the culture you were raised in, the area. And so, as I explained before, when it comes time to understand a word, I do two things. I go to my 1951 dictionary, because it hasn't been that much assaulted by the government, by religions, or social movements. Or I look up the etymology. And you can look up the etymology of a word or a phrase to get a better understanding. Most definitions go back to Latin and Greek, mostly Greek times, ancient times, times of antiquity. What does it mean to aim for spiritual perfection? You may say, well, Johann, nothing's perfect. Nothing's perfect. And in a sense, that's a true statement to a degree. Have you ever decided to hang pictures on a wall in your house? Maybe you do it by yourself, maybe you have some help. The first thing I do is look at the frames and look where that, I'll call it a clasp, that little piece or that hole in the back of the picture, on the back of the picture, and where it's located. Some are located near the top. Some are located an inch down. So I measure it in my mind. So you put the picture up on a wall, and you're looking at it. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's angled to one side. So you step back, look at it again, adjust the picture, and say that's perfect. To say that's perfect involves two things: an act to adjust it, and then looking at it as it's displayed on the wall. Now sometimes because I live in an old house, I get deceived. Put a picture on the wall, I look at it in this context. How does it align with the four sides of the wall? The top, the bottom, and both sides. My walls are painted light colors with dark wood trim around each side. And it's an old house, and it's not perfect. The picture may be aligned, you could say, properly, but when I step back and look at it as it sits within that wall, the frames of the wall, the four sides, it may not be perfect. So I say to myself, it's balanced as best as it could be. And depending on what angle you look at it from, you may find some faults in it. To get that picture to where I could live with it involves a process, which is one of the definitions, the meanings of perfect. Having accomplished something, having accomplished a goal. My goal was to put the picture on the wall. There's a quote in the 12-step program that goes, progress, not perfection. But does that mean we don't aim for perfection? And I specifically use the example of a picture on a wall because it involves patterns. The picture itself is a pattern. It could be a perfect square, it could be a rectangle, it could be a round picture. And the backdrop, the wall, is another pattern, the four sides. There's a term in welding called making dimes or stacking dimes. In welding, a stack of dimes is a term used to describe a pattern. A welder might describe it as a good-looking weld. A stack of dimes is a good-looking weld. But here's an interesting fact. A good-looking weld, a strong weld, will nearly always look good. But a good-looking weld does not mean it's a weld with strong integrity. What does integrity mean? Let's look it up. Integrity means honesty, sincerity, uprightness, wholeness, completeness, perfect condition, or soundness. What about you? Do you have integrity? Are you as honest as you could be? Are you sincere? Are you upright? Are you sound? Are you in perfect condition? I can answer that for myself. No, I'm not. But I aim. I aim every day for spiritual perfection. To aim means point or direct. Direct one's efforts. Direction aimed at. Purpose, intention. And my purpose every day, my intention every day, is to aim for spiritual perfection. Well, nobody's perfect, Johan. Well, you keep saying that and you'll believe it. My question to you, what I propose to you is, can you have a perfect day, spiritually speaking? Can you have a perfect day? The answer is yes. The proof is in the pudding. Some people say it's not the proof in the pudding, it's the butter on the bread. So let's talk about that. When I was an active alcoholic, I could never envision life with alcohol or without it. I couldn't stop. I became bewildered until I met some folks who said, you don't have to stop forever drinking. You don't have to stop forever. We're going to teach you how to stop one day at a time. One day at a time was a new idea for me, a new method, a new concept, one day at a time. And yet, decades later, being clean and sober, I can tell you, I can stop drinking one day at a time. And then I learned through that program, I can stop other things one day at a time. Alcoholism, or any difficulty you're having, is a symptom of an underlying problem. And that underlying problem has to do with patterns. We're back to patterns. Habits we've developed. And these things center in the mind. On this channel, if you come here to hear something and then walk away and feel good afterwards, this isn't the channel to be on. On this channel, we're going to go into the mind. Into the mind. We are going to go into the mind and clean every room. Go into every cabinet. Look and see what's there. We are going to inspect every shelf. We are going to walk through every hallway. We are going to sweep the floors of the mind. One of the problems I feel today is People have forgotten what happened in the past. And when I talk about forgot what happened in the past, I mean how people lived before us, what they did before us. And when we talk about knowledge, when we talk about intelligence, when we talk about behavior, the arrow points toward ancient times and philosophy. Philosophies that rose up long before organized religion. Like Greek schools of thought, where they discuss situations of the day, discuss them in depth. Have you watched that video in my playlist, Yes, I Sinned, but It's Not What You Think? The origin of the word sin reveals several things to us. One is, the origin of the word sin was among the ancient Greeks an archery term. When the archer missed the bullseye of the target, people would yell, and I'll pronounce this wrong, I'm sure, Hamartia or Hamartia, Hamartia. So when the archer missed the target, they would yell in the Greek language, "You missed the mark. You missed what you were aiming for." Did those archers become sad, distressed, overwhelmed? Probably not. Because they knew they need to practice. They need to practice more. They need to develop the skill to hit the bullseye. Some archers are perfect and hit the bullseye all the time. They hit what they are aiming at. Some do not. What do you aim for every day? What's your bullseye? What's your target? Spiritually speaking. Do you want to hit your target perfectly? In other words, when we take that dual meaning of the word perfect, the question is, can you have a perfect day? Add to that an addendum. When we think about that other meaning of perfect, that is, having accomplished the goal, can you accomplish your goals on a daily basis? Just like quitting drinking one day at a time. And I found on this spiritual quest, I can quit things many things one day at a time. I could aim for that perfection. I could aim for excellence. I could aim to accomplish my goal. If you've been following me for a while, you've heard me say I follow 3 principles every day. 3 principles. I developed these 3 principles from the many spiritual paths, the many spiritual ways, religions, doctrines, tenets, philosophy. And this is what I aim for. 1. From the time I wake up till the time I go to sleep, to not harm anyone with word or deed. Now I ask you, can you do that perfectly one day at a time? From the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep, are you able to accomplish that goal? The answer is yes. The second principle, to not engage in any activity that is destructive or meaningless. And again, I pose the question to you. If you aim from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep to not engage in any activity that is destructive or meaningless, can you have a perfect day? The answer is yes. Thirdly, principle number 3, to not put anything into my system that affects my functions in a negative way, mentally, emotionally, physically. If you aim every day and your goal is to not put anything into your system, your body, that affects it in a negative way, I ask you, can you have a perfect day? The answer is yes. When I take that 2-tier definition of perfect, excellent, without fault, the first one, and the second one, to accomplish something, I can have perfect days. Here's the key. Here's the key. What are you doing that enables you to have a day of excellence? What are you doing that enables you to have a day without faults? What are you doing that enables you to accomplish your goals? For me, I rely on principles from ancient times, times of antiquity, spiritual principles and philosophy. What I've learned from the Stoics is, from the time I wake up until the time I go to bed, at any time of the day, I could be hurt, frustrated, disappointed, or annoyed by a person, place, or thing. Hurt, frustrated, disappointed, or annoyed by a person, place, or thing. Are you the type of person that everything bothers you? Or are you the type of person looking for solutions? Not everybody's out to get you. Maybe some people are. Maybe you shouldn't associate with that type. And sometimes it's not your fault when you run into someone who is out to get you for various reasons. The way you look, number one. And the list goes on. The question remains. The question remains, how do you behave during the day when you're hurt, frustrated, disappointed, or annoyed? Do you seek revenge? Or do you seek a solution? Do you want to be wise, or do you want to be wounded? What I've learned over the years, when I, like those ancient Greek archers during the Olympics, when I miss my goal, when I miss the bullseye, there's a process that follows. And the process that follows is rooted in ancient Greek schools of thought. So you made a mistake. And I say mistake because I'm going to get into people believe that they sin, as in breaking God's law. So you made a mistake, and you hurt someone with your word or deed. Oh, this goes back to my first principle. From the time I wake up till the time I go to bed, to not harm anyone with my word or deed. But let's say it happens. What I have today is a conscience. It grew out of years of spiritual practices following spiritual principles. I usually know when I've harmed someone by word or deed. And what those ancient schools of thought say is, once you recognize it, the proper thing to do, the right thing to do, is to aim to make it right, to set things right. How do I do that, Johan? If you're sorry for what you did, if you regret what you did, if you're a person with a conscience, you might say to yourself, that wasn't me. And in most cases, on a spiritual path, you don't do things intentionally. Here's something you could look up. What are sins? Sins. What are sins of omission and sins of commission? Some are mistakes, some are done on purpose. Sin, missing the mark, I mean. Missing what you aimed for. And I only can reflect on these situations because I aim for spiritual perfection every day. I want to have excellence. I want to be without fault. I want to accomplish what I set out to do. Those three principles I mentioned. In my case, and it doesn't happen often, I'm in meditation in the morning, and I realize my language with somebody the day before was out of line. You might realize you did something the day before that was inappropriate. Either one, you realize you made a mistake. You sinned. You sinned in the sense, what the Greek Olympic archers would say, you missed the mark. You missed the bullseye. You missed what you were aiming for. So now what? The ancient Greeks tell us to set it right by making an apology and making an amends. Why? Why? Two reasons. One, you've harmed someone with your words or deeds. Is that who you are? And two, if that's not you, then that's what you need to do. Set things right. So you go to that person. And even if, let's describe it this way, they kind of instigated your behavior, you don't mention it. You put that aside because the focus is on you. If you're sorry for what you did, if you regret what you did, you make the amends. You make the apology. What comes next? What comes next is a method I use that I learned from Step 10 in a 12 and 12 AA book. Well, speaking for me, I don't want to make that mistake again. That's not what I aim for every day. So, I make the apology, I make the amends, I leave, and as soon as possible, I go somewhere unencumbered by distractions and look at the situation again. When I look at the situation again, I ask myself this question: what could I have done differently? And you may come up with a couple of scenarios of what you could have done differently to prevent harming a person with your words or deeds. The purpose of that assessment, the purpose of that self-examination is to come up with concepts, methods, and ideas that prevent you from behaving badly again. And the key is, when you're reviewing the situation and you come up with various ideas of what you could have done differently, you imagine in your mind, you see it, you look at it, think about it, envision it, what you could have done differently. Now I want to talk about why we do the things we do. Well, when it comes to harming other people, that's the point we're at here. Now, I've been clean and sober and spiritual for over 30 years, but not continuous. 13 years the first time, and now a little over 20 years. Here's what I learned. Listening to other people and observing other people, because people teach me what to do and what not to do. The term that's used today is, I messed up again. do you mess up? And what do you do to correct it? Do you blame other people? Do you make excuses for your behavior? In the New Testament, Apostle Paul mentions this. I think it's in one of the books to the Corinthians. The things I should do, I don't do. And the things I shouldn't do, those are the things I do. And then he goes on to say, it's because of the sin in me. Now, he doesn't expound on the sin part. He doesn't say, I broke God's laws, I sinned that way. He doesn't say, I missed the mark, I missed the bullseye. Considering its ancient times and times of antiquity, I'm going to guess when he talks about the sin in me, he's talking about missing the mark, missing the bullseye, because that concept of sin nature didn't come about until around 300, 400, 500 AD. So let's talk about missing the mark. The things I should do, I don't do. The things I shouldn't do, those are the things I do. Why? I'll tell you why. Until you ascend and transcend, until you exist and experience above the normal level, until you exist and experience above the physical level, what we do is based on pleasure. What makes us feel good? What gives us a dopamine hit? What stimulates us? I hope you're not the type of person that gets a kick out of hurting people's feelings. I hope you're not the type of person that when somebody hurts, frustrates, disappoints, or annoys you, you punish them. Let's go back to something I mentioned last week or the week before, and I've mentioned it several times. What is on your mind the first thing when you wake up in the morning besides going to the bathroom? What's on your mind? What do you aim to do? What's your goal? To go on your phone and check text messages? To go on Facebook? To go on TikTok? To go on X? Is your goal first thing in the morning to play video games? Is your goal first thing in the morning to watch pornography? Is your goal in the first thing in the morning to get revenge on somebody that hurt, frustrated, disappointed, or annoyed you? What are your goals? What are you aiming at? How does that affect your quality of life? Without spiritual principles, from ancient times and times of antiquity, before organized religion, without principles to guide us, chances are we'll blame other people. Chances are we'll make excuses for our behavior. why I do the things I shouldn't do is because I do not do self-examination on a daily basis. It's because I do not do self-assessments. It's because I do not do honest and sincere self-appraisals of my behavior. However, albeit nonetheless, I understand today what's behind it. It's about stimulation. It's about dopamine hits. It's about pleasure. I'm not saying don't have pleasure in your life. I'm not saying it's wrong to engage in healthy activity that gives you a dopamine hit and a stimulation. I'm not talking about those things. Here's the question I want to ask next. What are the reasons you might want to change your inappropriate behavior? I used to change it because I thought God would punish me. I used to change it because I didn't want to go to hell. But now that I've entered the realm of unio mystica, one with God, God consciousness, if I behave inappropriately, I don't feel right. It has nothing to do with going to hell. I get to the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is my character, my personality. And yes, I can change it one day at a time. And when I make mistakes, set that right, make amends, make apologies, and then go look at what I could have done differently. So that tomorrow when I wake up and aim for spiritual perfection, yes, I can have a perfect day. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about an experience I had. In the 90s, I was a member of a Bible preaching church, and one of the elders was accused of inappropriate behavior with a child. And so the pastor wanted to handle it biblically. That is, to get the person to admit they committed a wrong, and if they refused to admit they committed a wrong, they would be brought before the congregation. In other words, they weren't going to involve the police. And this elder said to a few of us in a conversation, I'm forgiven. I'm forgiven of that sin, that inappropriate behavior. He continued and said, 2,000 years ago on the cross, Jesus saw what I was going to do. He knew what I was going to do. And because he died on the cross, I'm forgiven. Is that taking responsibility for your actions or making excuses? I've studied history enough to tell you the focus isn't, and I don't know where this started. Jesus died for our sins. The focus isn't the crucifixion, although that is the focus. Ignored, glossed over, and forgotten is the teachings, parables that Jesus told with lessons for life. I started to talk about my experiences in the 12-step program, what I observed. You know, people teach me what to do and what not to do. So let's step away from using this "I'm forgiven" concept. What's the other thing people do when they behave inappropriately? And this is my experience in the 12-step program. I need to reiterate that people that do not practice the spiritual principles, people that do not have a spiritual awakening, people that do not have that psychic change, people that do not have that profound personality change, continue to make excuses for inappropriate behavior. So, when they don't maintain their spiritual condition using the spiritual tools, prayer, meditation, and self-examination, they come to a meeting and say, I messed up again. Here's what happened. And my experience over decades is, this is what follows. Well, I'm Irish. What do you expect? You know how the Irish are, right? Or they'll say, I'm German, or I'm Dutch. What do you expect? You know how Germans are, Dutch people are. And you could insert any group of people in that excuse. Some people say, well, I'm human. I made a mistake. I screwed up. I messed up. What they don't do is what I mentioned earlier, what the 10th step tells us to do. Examine a situation. And if you're not making excuses and you've developed a consciousness, God consciousness, unio mystica, you'll feel bad about what happened. And if you feel bad about what happened, like the ancients told us, you need to set that right. So they don't always make amends based on they regret what they did. Based on, that's not me. They just might make an amends or an apology to get things to settle down. I don't want that person mad at me, in other words. And what they don't do is, what I mentioned, go somewhere, sit in silence, and look at the situation again and ask themselves, what could I have done differently? And the question, what could I have done differently, leads to an idea, concept, or motive on not behaving like that again. But most people don't. And then they use meetings as a sounding board. And oftentimes, this is my experience, people will say, oh yeah, you know those people out there, they don't understand us. Doesn't matter if they understand you or not. It is about them, and it's not about them. It's about you. Where are you at in your spiritual walk? What are your goals for the day? What are you aiming at? Are you aiming at spiritual perfection? Is it possible? Yes, one day at a time, from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep. Are you able to accomplish those things you set out to do that you go over in your mind in morning meditation? I sit on my deck. I get up, go to the bathroom, grab a coffee, sit on my deck. I've said it before and I'll say it again. My thoughts are flowing like this creek. If you've ever walked a creek or a babbling brook, at some point the running water stops, and right in the middle of the creek is still water, a pond. Water flows into it, water flows out. When I'm in meditation, my mind calms down, and then I collect my thoughts. And I ask myself, what do I need to do today? What should I do? What do I have to do? What's important? Does it involve anything physical? When do I have my most energy? And as I mentioned, it may arise that it comes to my mind in this time of quiet, I owe somebody an apology. And I remember in the back of my mind those three principles I live by, one day at a time. 1, from the time I wake up until the time I go to sleep, to not harm anyone with my words or deeds. Can you do that one day at a time? Can you do that from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep? From the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep, can you go through the day without harming anyone with words or deeds? The answer is yes. Just like when you align that picture on the wall, you may exclaim, that's perfect. It's perfect in 2 ways. It's perfect because there was an activity involved, a process to get it there. And it's perfect because it looks good. Principle number 2, to not engage in any activity that is harmful, destructive, or useless. If that's your goal for the day, can you accomplish it? Yes. And 3rd, to not put anything into my system that affects my functions in a negative way. Can you do that from the time you wake up until the time you go to bed? Yes. What happens when you fall short in any of those 3? What happens when you miss the mark? What happens when you miss the bullseye? If you regret it, you need to make it right. You don't make excuses, you don't blame other people. But the key is to look at that situation somewhere in silence, unencumbered by distractions, and ask yourself, what could I have done differently? Just like that archer in the ancient Greek Olympics. If they missed the bullseye, chances are they're not going to blame anybody else or make excuses. Discipline back then was different than discipline today. And so they practice. They look at the situation, these archers, and ask themselves, what could I have done differently? Maybe my stance wasn't right. Maybe I didn't take into consideration the wind. Maybe I wasn't imperfect. Maybe I was imperfect drawing that bow, drawing the arrow back. These things. Are you aiming for spiritual perfection? What is your aim? What are your intentions on a daily basis? Are you able to have a spiritually perfect day? Answer that question now that we've had this discussion. Are you able to have a spiritually perfect day? Not a spiritually perfect life. I mentioned this a couple of videos ago. Every day I go back and draw from the well. I draw from the well. The power of the Creator, the power of the divine. Lastly, this isn't about how I present myself to the world, how I look to other people. Am I driving a right car? Am I wearing a suit and tie? Am I going to this place because other people do it and it looks good? I do things. I practice. Just like those archers, I practice daily, especially in the morning. I practice my aim, what I'm aiming for. What are you aiming for every day? What are your goals every day? And when you make a mistake, or you sin in the sense of ancient Greek Olympic archers, you miss the mark, you miss what you're aiming at, you don't hit the bullseye, what do you do? What do you do?